On the surface, the Freedom Convoy movement seemed like freedom, but there was a more sinister story that was unfolding behind it. So I'm going to take a bit of a dive now into the connections between the Freedom Convoy and far right, pro-fascist and racist groups in Canada, and who was really behind what was going on, and what was the goal that they were trying to achieve. What was the politic they were trying to spread at the time, and how successful were they? We'll talk about that and more on the show. We'll explore the convoy's organizers themselves and their ties to extremist ideologies and the suspicious funding sources that backed the convoy. Okay, let's go.
There it is. This is bad news. My God. Falling out right now. Anything could happen. Get on! Wow.
I'll watch the video later. They climb up in this.
It was supposed to be a peaceful gathering by a group called Red Deer Against Racism. It turned into this. Sunday afternoon in Red Deer, physical confrontations and threats.
You want to go? Let's dance right now.
Now rally organizers say they were threatened in the days leading up to Sunday's event. Returning to where it happened, saying RCMP showed up too late, and now they're hoping that they'll do something.
I've been discriminated in the past and even threatened, and I don't want to allow these hate groups to silence us.
These white supremacists brought violence, and our peaceful security were assaulted.
A man who admits he took part in disrupting the rally has a different perspective.
Do I agree that what they did on their side was appropriate? No. What they did was disgusting.
Patrick King went on Facebook to defend the actions of the counter group he was in and send a message.
Let's cancel culture. Let's cancel it. Let's take the race and ethnicity and creed and religion and take it out of the equation.
Alberta's Justice Minister has seen some of the video coming out of Red Deer.
And I am admittedly disturbed.
Casey Madhu says he took his concerns to Alberta's top Mountie.
I have spoken to RCMP Deputy Commissioner Curtis Zabloki and reiterated the need to get to the bottom of this.
Red Deer RCMPs say other rallies and protests have been peaceful. They had analysts working on this gathering in advance, but organizers in the counter group showed up earlier than officers.
We certainly didn't expect to see what we saw on Sunday. I don't think anybody did.
Superintendent Gerald Gromeyer told media an investigation is now underway. If victims and witnesses come forward, there could be enough evidence to warrant assault charges. Going forward, he says his officers will be prepared.
This escalated very quickly today, so clearly the tone has changed. We'll ensure that our response matches that.
David Owasik, CTV News, Red Deer.
So we'll set this up by looking at antihate.ca's article, The Freedom Convoy is Nothing But a Vehicle for the Far Right. It's obviously a couple years old now, but I think that a lot of what they're saying here stands and needs to be understood by people. And what I really want to draw from, first of all, in this article is the United We Roll convoy, right? So we'll just check out what it says in the article here. So the Freedom Convoy draw comparisons to this less funded protest movement in 2019, the United We Roll convoy. It was organized primarily by associates of Canada's Yellow Vest movement. It painted a narrative of disenfranchised oil and gas workers riding their rigs across the country to force a detached and distant Ottawa to listen. Yellow Vest Canada was largely funded by individuals already associated with Canada's far right, which at the time was primarily united by anti-Muslim racism and Islamophobia. Excited by the protests held in France, they copied the signature uniform name and adopted new grievances that would get them a much larger audience. They said they were for oil and gas and that they represented Western alienation from a distant liberal Ottawa, but the Facebook groups were also full of hundreds of examples of anti-Muslim explicit racism and called for Prime Minister Trudeau's arrest and execution in some cases, a theme that remained present amongst COVID conspiracy demonstrations. By the time the United We Roll arrived in Ottawa, media caught on. Neo-Nazi Faith Goldie spoke on one of the stages. The anti-Muslim hate group Northern Guard were spotted in attendance. Christopher Hayes, who was previously convicted of uttering threats against Trudeau and had a history of membership in Islamophobic hate groups, was there. Ultimately, the UWR was a bust with far fewer vehicles showing up than promised and only a few hundred participants. Demoralized, the Yellow Vest Canada movement started to die out, although some holdouts kept smaller demonstrations going for months. So the lead up to the 2022 Freedom Convoy is extremely similar to the lead up of the UWR, and it shares some of the same organizers and participants. They were even using the promotional materials, the same ones, except this time they had the weight of COVID conspiracy movement behind them and $6 million. So let's talk about the new convoys, most public figures and whatnot. My research has found the convoy's organizers have a long history of far-right extremist activism, and those of us who are in anti-racist movement for a long time back, we've known some of these players from a long time ago. We weren't fooled when they started organizing for freedom. We knew that they were not for everyone's freedom. No, we know who these people are. So one of the convoy's main organizers was Tamara Lich, who has been linked to the Yellow Vest movement, which was the far-right group that promoted conspiracy theories and hate speech. Lich has been a vocal supporter of the anti-immigrant and anti-Islamic ideology of the Yellow Vest movement. That was really what she was about. So another key organizer was Benjamin Dichter, who's been linked to the Three Percenters. That's a far-right militia group that has been involved in several violent incidents. Dichter also promoted conspiracy theories about the COVID-19 vaccine and made public statements supporting white nationalist ideologies. The convoy spokesperson, Tom Marazzo, has a long history of promoting far-right extremist ideologies, including anti-Semitic and Islamophobic conspiracies. Marazzo has been linked to the Proud Boys, which is the white nationalist group that was involved in several violent incidents that included the attack on the Capitol in the United States, which is what they were trying to achieve in their On to Ottawa movement. They were trying to achieve a similar sort of, attack at the government, perhaps overthrow if they had the numbers and the capability of doing so. So go back to this article and just looking at, who these people are. And of course, Tamara's pictured with Tom Quiggin here, who's a dubious security expert. And he's got an anti-Islamist podcast, the Quiggin Report. Okay, so this is nothing new. So we'll just go past Benjamin Dichter here, and we'll go to Pat King and see what they're talking about here. So Pat King, who's another yellow vester. If you're not familiar with him, protesting against anti-racist groups in Alberta before all this, let me fill you in a little bit more. One time he was a major figure in the Wexit movement, as well as United We Roll. So these are people who were about, let's break up Canada, long before the United States was reigniting the discussion. So he's listed as the contact at the time to join the Alberta North portion of the convoy. So, and he's done jail since, and he's crying what a victim he is. He's a conspiracy theorist and streamer. He made headlines when he supporters confronted members of an anti-racist rally in Red Deer, Alberta. Several instances of violence occurred during that event, including against an individual who attempted to serve King with a restraining order. Black Lives Matter and Antifa are planning a huge rally to disrupt our community, he said at the time. Help support us to drive out these left-wing anarchists that are trying to disrupt communities and trying to threaten people. He drew attention after a wild misinterpretation of court documents led him claiming he forced Alberta to abandon its public health lockdowns. It wasn't the case. In the past, King gone on record about his feelings about the Anglo-Saxon replacement that plans to flood Canada with refugees and subvert the education system, a thin rebranding of the Great Replacement theory touted by ethno-nationalists. This is white supremacism. At other points, King expressed overtly racist and anti-Semitic statements. In 2019, streaming about the upcoming federal election, he complained that he had to leave the movement due to their lack of success. The election won't matter unless you want to change your language to Chinese, Mandarin, or Hebrew. Here's the quote. Run it.
Unless you want to change your national language to Chinese or Mandarin or Hebrew. You might want to change your name to Ishmael, or drop a bunch of change down the stairs and call yourself Chong Ching Ching Chang. Unless you get up off your asses and demand change.
And he has distorted facts about the Holocaust, a form of Holocaust denial, saying that it was reduced to 1.5 million people, not those 6 million Jews that it was said to be. He invoked anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that the Jewish people are secretly in control of world governance, media, and finances. The questions have been asked several times to ADL and the Jewish government and communities. We have Jewish world bankers who are dictating our government policies and controlling our politicians. This is disturbing stuff. And that's why the truck driver associations condemned the convoy, because who wants to be seen as part of this? It was clear who these people were and what they were about, what they were doing. So convoy organizers were linked to groups like the Proud Boys, the 3%ers, and the Diagolon Flag Movement. These groups were involved in violent incidents, including the January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol. They promote hate speech and conspiracy theories. I'm not making this up. That's what they say and do. They can kind of gloss it over. You can try to gloss it over yourself and pretend that it's not what it is, but in the end, it's what it is. The Proud Boys are a white nationalist group. They've been linked to several violent incidents, including the 2018 clash with anti-fascist protesters in Portland, Oregon. The 3%ers are a far-right militia group. They were involved in several violent incidents, including the 2014 standoff with the Bureau of Land Management in Nevada. The Diagolon Flag Movement is a white nationalist group that promotes the idea of separate white nations right here in Canada. The movement's leader, Jeremy McDonald, has been linked to several far-right extremist groups, including the Proud Boys and the 3%ers. So where did the funding for the convoy come from? We know that like 43% of it came from the United States. So it's supposedly this pro-Canada organization that was being funded from outside sources. So my investigating has found that the convoy received a significant funding from, a lot of unknown sources. One of them was a $1 million donation from an anonymous donor. We don't know who it was. We found some convoy organizers had ties to right-wing think tanks and foundations that have a history of promoting extremist ideologies. For example, the convoy received funding from Rebel Media, which is a far-right media outlet that's promoted conspiracy theories and hate speech. The convoy also received funding from Canada Strong and Free Network, a right-wing think tank that has promoted extremist ideologies and has ties to far-right groups. Also, though, what are the ideological connections between the Freedom Convoy and other extremist movements? So my research has found that the convoy's organizers made public statements supporting Trump and his America First agenda long before the second term of Trump came around. This was what they were about even back then. They were all for Trump. And at the time, I was like, these people are traitors. We found that some convoy participants promoted the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state, which has been popularized by extremists in the United States. The ideology is rooted in a belief of white nationalism. It's got a desire to undermine democratic institutions and promote authoritarianism. The convoy's promotion of these ideologies was a serious concern for the safety and well-being of minority communities and the stability of democratic institutions in Canada. And people who were in Ottawa would tell you how scared they were when this was all going on, how people who were visible minorities felt threatened, how people who were wearing masks were yelled at and confronted. It was ugly, man. The Freedom Convoy, though, it's not an isolated incident. It's part of a broader trend of far-right extremism in Canada and beyond that's trying to push a narrative and push public opinion and thought towards belief systems that are more favorable to their goals. So my investigating's found that far-right extremist groups have been on the rise in Canada in recent years. They've always been there. In the 90s, we had serious fights, us punk rockers, and this is when I first really became an anti-fascist. Not just because my family survived Holland and came to Canada after World War II, and our feelings as a family about that experience, but also because I got into the punk rock scene, and in the 90s the punk rock scene was in open warfare with neo-Nazi groups in Ontario. They would attack us and we had to defend ourselves from them. So this was something that was going on, and eventually they got beaten into hiding. I got some crazy stories. Well, someday I'll tell you the crazy stories. You wouldn't fucking believe some of this shit. Nonetheless, I'm not here to talk about all that today. I'm here to talk about the high-profile incidents of hate crimes and violence that are linked to this movement that seems to have now really infiltrated right-wing conservative thinking on the whole. And to me, conservative belief systems now don't really reflect traditional conservative values. They're a switch to a further right, to a rhetoric and to an understanding that's not what Joe Clark would have had, okay? Just in the same way that Trump's tariff policies completely fly in the face of Reagan's idea, and I don't like Reagan either, but it's like a complete turn from what would be considered normal, practical, conservative, ideological underpinnings of the 80s and prior to that. So we found that these groups have been linked to international networks of far-right extremism, including QAnon and the Boogaloo movement. These movements have promoted conspiracy theories and hate speech and have been involved in violence and terrorism. And that's why the RCMP and the FBI said the greatest threat internally for terrorism in the United States and Canada over the last 10 years was from white nationalist groups. So it's a symptom, though, of a larger problem of far-right extremism in Canada. It requires a comprehensive and coordinated response from law enforcement, government agencies, and community organizations, and people like yourself and people like myself who got to take a stand against racism, hate, intolerance, and promote a culture of inclusivity. And you'll recall that I am the guy that Arthur Topham, who was found guilty for promoting hate speech and for spreading Mein Kampf in our community, Arthur tried to sue me, and the case was thrown out. Myself and Daniel, a lawyer who was an ex-neo-Nazi, Arthur tried to sue us, and the people that were supporting Arthur were people who were well known in the neo-Nazi movement in Canada. They were here in Quesnel showing up for his court dates. I saw them myself with my own eyes. I knew who these people were. Nonetheless, he tried to sue me. He's dead now. It's gone. But it's just an example of something that was right here in our community, someone who was operating openly and somehow was given an audience because he became one of the main organizers and one of the main voices of the Freedom Convoy movement in Quesnel. Was Arthur Topham, a convicted hate criminal who tried to sue me for calling him a Nazi. Well, if you spread Mein Kampf around my community and talk about world Jewry and how we need to eliminate it and start Holocaust denial, you know what? I'm going to call you a Nazi. And if you try to sue me and bring it to court, like Arthur, it's going to get laughed at and thrown out because you've been participating in behaviors that are linked to neo-Nazi extremism. Anyways, the convoy, it wasn't just a protest against COVID-19. That's what I'm trying to get at here today. That it was a front for far-right and extremist groups to promote ideological understandings and recruit new members to swing the conversation of conservatism in Canada to the right, to more or less what we now see as normal for conservative, like how many conservative candidates have to be Holocaust deniers and residential school deniers and whatnot before you get into your head, wow, like guilt by association on some level, because when I hang out with people, I go to events in the community and I get involved with something politically, there isn't people who have links to far-right hate extremist groups there for a reason. And it's always been the case. They weren't there protesting for freedom with us in the past, and it wasn't about freedom when they were protesting in 2022. So we got to be vigilant, okay, about truth and justice, and we got to call out groups that promote hate speech and conspiracy theories, and we have to understand that they might turn at you the way they did at me. I received death threats. I received lawsuits. I'm still here. I'm still talking. All right. And if you want to unsubscribe because of it, you don't want to hear my a window into my story or my understanding, that's your loss. Okay. Anyways, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video. And yeah, hit like, share, subscribe. Take care of yourself out there, and believe in freedom for all. If you really believe in that, you believe in freedom for all. You believe in freedom. You believe in not making people suffer. You believe in making things as easy as possible. It doesn't matter if they're at the bottom. It doesn't matter if they're undesirable. You try to make a just and equal and fair society for all. Okay, that's the show. Bye now.